Very uncomfortable issues. We have with us Katarzyna Boni, Michał Bilewicz, Marcin Zaremba, and myself, Ewa Wilk. And after yesterday's developments in this room and in the adjacent rooms, we decided to modify our initial intention, and we are going to extend the topic. We will go beyond the uncertainty, and we will also address anxiety and fear and trauma. I understand that this is the area of your academic interest. Professor Marcin Zaremba and Professor Michał Bilewicz, but also Katarzyna Boni, are well known for their research interests falling within these areas. The publications of our panelists address in their titles anxiety and fear, and I dotted some quotes that really summarize in a nutshell the area of your interest and research. We would like to have this discussion in a very natural, dramatic sequence. So first we will speak to the most extraordinary professor in Poland, Michał Bilewicz. Obviously this is like a side comment regarding the commotion with former President Andrzej Duda. But we are going to speak about the underlying mental conditions that are reflected in our mindsets. Kasia Boni is a reporter and writer and traveler, and she represents the youngest generation amongst our panel, and she will speak about anxiety of the future. So I will turn the floor over to you totally, and I think that each of you will respond to one another's comment, but I will try to jump in with quotes from Wielka Trwoga, one of the publications of one of our panelists, and Traumalandia is another publication that I would like to mention. It is true that all of us feel that the world is an uncertain place. The world has become uncertain and unpredictable. It triggers old anxieties, and as a result, also new anxieties are emerging. So the question is where they come from and why Polish people are very vulnerable to uncertainty and anxiety. Perhaps our divides, our uncertain positions, So please go first and tell us, what did you mean when you said that the historian who starts tackling fear is fearful himself? This is the title from the Great Terror, Wielka Trwoga. Okay, this is the time of uncertainty, but I'm going to be optimistic. We've seen worse. We live in the time of uncertainty, but I will go back 25 years. And to understand my claim that we've seen worse, well, 25 years ago, there was a World Trade Center attack, and Poles started to buy not only fuel, but also toilet paper and pasta to stock it up and to get prepared for the war. We were living in the fear of terrorism until another economic crisis that erupted in 2008. Please be reminded of all those incidents that we had in Brussels, in Spain, in Paris, that made us fearful. We were afraid to buy airfare ticket. And then let's go back further into the past, 1990s. I think that now the sentiment is really very positive about 1990s. There are more books published. Some things are highlighted in a positive way, like about clothing and architecture that emerged at that time. But at the same time, in many households right here in the districts of Łódź, people were actually getting the second pair of doors, and they were getting bars in their windows because the criminality was on the rise, and everyone was fearful of that. In the early 1990s, the former prime minister and his wife were murdered at home. That was something that was hard to believe in. So there was a fear of criminality. And then this huge transformative change covered by Piotr Sztompka, new trauma that emerged with the system transformation, with the new roles emerging, with the unemployment rate that was as high as 20%. Today, we are nowhere near 20% unemployment rate. Even amongst young people, the unemployment rate is about 3%, so it's really negligible. So we are not living under the terror of being fired any moment. This is not a pervasive experience. This is not a pervasive anxiety that would affect everyone. I'm going further back. And the martial law that sort of led to a certain conformity within the society. People were truly scared what's going to happen. People who were interned and detained were asking security service whether they are going to be taken east. So no one knew if it's not going to be another replay of Chilean scenario or Argentina's scenario, where opposition leaders were thrown out of the aircrafts and helicopters over the ocean. Now, going back into the 1970s, the first half of the 1970s was optimistic and joyful, but eventually Russians marched into Afghanistan, and then Pershing and cruise missiles were deployed in the Western countries. And then if we go even further back, then there was like a wave of price raises that were affecting people, and people were panicking that they will not be able to make the ends meet. Well, you can actually find old press clippings in the old magazines, how Polish people responded to threats when there is a threat of war, or when there was a threat or a rumor spread that there will be a transaction of exchanging money or devaluating money. People were buying gold. You were running for gold. So that was really almost a criminal transaction made by the government. But this fear was still there. Every, I don't know, 5 years, we have this rumor that the government is going to do something with the currency. So then people were going to the jewelry stores and buying jewelry, whatever they could get in terms of gold. Now the war, the greatest panic, war panic, lasted for 2 months. That was after the war started in Ukraine. I don't want to trivialize it. It was truly an important experience. Until today, the middle class is getting ready to buy apartments in Spain or Portugal, so far into the West. Now, in 1961, when the Berlin Wall was built, people were writing letters to each other, asking questions. Shall I leave the city of Wrocław or shall I leave the city of Elbląg? I remember a student, high school student, writing a letter to her parents. All the girls left. We don't know what's going to happen. Someone else was writing in their letters, come back from vacation because the situation is uncertain. So people were buying food to stock up. They were buying gold. They were thinking whether to sell the car because the car can be confiscated by the military. So we had a few waves of the war panics. And I talked about the fear of criminality and the bars that people would put on their windows. Many of you travel around Europe and you are visiting and sightseeing some Western European countries. Jean de Limon, what he wrote about his book, The Fear in the Western Culture, he started with the description of Magdeburg or Nuremberg, where you have double walls around the cities and moats and suspended bridges, and then the city is locked up after, I don't know, 8 p.m. or something. So that's the quote from the Middle Ages and also following ages in Europe. People were always fearful. So when we speak about the time of uncertainty, it proves that our memory runs short. It seems that some anxieties have been forgotten. Some anxieties are still with us today. I think that Michał Bilewicz will address them. Okay, before we ask Michał, I have one question to follow up. Don't we have some replacement fears or anxieties? Because today, a vast majority of the Polish society is fearful of strangers. We are not building shelters, air defense shelters. We are not really packing up survival backpacks. Well, there is a discourse in the public domain, but we don't have a mass movement. Well, politicians are trying to keep the fear of war still in the mainstream, but people are not really feeling it. But there are some replacement fears or anxieties, like about strangers or LGBT, etc. Hello. It is true that the fear of the stranger is a replacement fear. Or yesterday, we had a very interesting panel about migration movements. And I could feel that the dominating language is the language of security and safety. And as Marcin said, back in the 1990s and after the year 2000, we remember what was going on at the Warsaw Stadium. It was the territory of gangs from Azerbaijan and from some other countries. It is true that at that time we had more criminals, also migrant criminals. But no one cares that much about it. But here today, Minister Buda claims that we are facing a huge threat to our security that comes with migration. And it seems that today this risk or this threat is not as pervasive as it used to be back then in Poland. No, I agree, but when we look into the past, there were many more threats and risks. The question is whether people are rational and logical and how they assess the situation. So when they assess safety and security, they don't look at the current status, they just look at their perception and belief and the trending norms. So the trending norms, as they put it in the social psychology, trending norms are forward-looking, so what people would really believe in the future. And I think that Katarzyna Boni will address other types of fears related to climate. And this is one of the fear categories that determine the fundamental perceptions of security and safety.
The second category of fear is technology related, new technology related, or it relates to a loss of jobs. We remember Tarnowski's text. People are redundant in the violent world. People believe they will become redundant and replaced by AI. So these are civilizational fears. And these are existential, basic fears to which these societies have not developed the right response. So what can we do? We can redirect the concern or fear to other fields where safety could be provided. This is an illusion of safety, just as was provided with the Berlin Wall. Another idea is to prevent NGOs from entering schools, to prevent the children from the influence of gender and LGBT. There is a great book by Narutowicz Institute about the fear of gender topics, which is not strictly identified or defined. And we could think of some simple remedies. Wherever politicians are able to provide a simple remedy, these are the domains that politicians are willing to mention. So they are willing to talk about migration, LGBT, and other threats, but addressing real threats which are related to changing in the world of labor or climate change, climate catastrophe. These are avoided, and these are the areas that involve fundamental uncertainty. I'm really talking more about fear than uncertainty, because these sensations are different in different people. Some people have more tolerance for uncertainty. They actually like such world. And there is other people who do not feel confident in uncertain world. It's also about the sense of control. I plan things and I achieve things. So when you're out of control, it creates an extensive anxiety in people, especially when people do not trust the state. If people do not believe the state is able to respond to their anxieties. We saw it during COVID times. We had some research from Poland and Germany, and Polish people felt a lot of anxiety, significant amount of anxiety. Nobody ignored this phenomenon. So there was this extensive fear. And while in Germany, the higher anxiety, the more trust in politicians appeared, because they were confident that the people in power knew what they were doing. So they believed they are supposed to give away some of their freedom to feel safe. In Poland, it was quite different. We immediately started having theories that people are just trying to limit our freedoms. They try to make money on face masks or some medical equipment. There was certainty that politicians were not acting in the best interest of the public, that they were following their individual interests. So Polish people went directly from fear into conspiracy theories. Well, now you see, you're a historian and you discuss psychology in your books, first in The Great Terror, then in The Great Disillusionment. You try to describe certain social phenomena. Now, Michał, you are a social psychologist and a sociologist. You enter the world, the domain of history. Quite an interesting experiment. And I promised to give you a quote, and this is from Trauma Land. Poles who are daily accustomed to the thought that the only thing that is waiting for them is a tragedy and failure. You're probably referring to historical politics. They tend to prepare for such situations. So it's a safe psychological umbrella that is meant to protect us from losing further. Can you elaborate on that? Okay, I have an intuition. I think I know what you mean, but what is this psychological umbrella in complaining? Psychologists sometimes say we self-inflict certain challenges or certain troubles. Like there's this Polish culture of complaining. And people live in this fatalist state of mind that things will get worse, we will fail again. And this actually protects you from failure. It makes failure less threatening. I'm no longer to blame for failures. I can try to find some external causes of this failure and say, this is the way things are. So this attitude, in a way, protects my self-esteem. And so, do you mean that if you face a bear in the middle of a forest, you know what you can expect, right? It will attack anyway and eat you. Yes, and that would be typical of traumatized societies that have experienced multiple acts of terror. So it's difficult to develop a sense of individual but also collective agency in a society whose fate has been determined by external forces to this extent. We attempt to develop this story about our independence, but look at Polish fate. We have always been influenced by external forces. Katarzyna, you travel so much all over the world. I'm still impressed by your book from 10 years ago that you co-authored, and these were reports, short stories, and it was a story about people who, about refugees, about a big refugee camp, one of the biggest in the world. And you also wrote another book about a place where people attempted, and they're still trying, to create a world without fear. It's a utopia. And I also have a quote from your book, from Auroville. This is your book, and this is a place in India. So the mother, the spiritual leader, decided that there would be no names, no police, no judges, no prisons, no money, no religion, no beggars, and everybody would be healthy. Well, how would that be possible? How are they doing? And I can actually guess what the answer is. But my real question is, are you really able to remove fear or anxiety from a human being? Or is this really a mechanism that is imposed, as anthropologists or psychologists say? Does fear have a protective effect as well? In your work, you deal with fear of death in your work, which is the most existential fear. That's your domain in which you write, and you're practically involved. So my question is it even possible to remove the emotions of fear and anxiety from humans? Well, I didn't even know how to answer this question and how to give you a little bit of hope and how to let you breathe. I don't think you can eliminate fear and anxiety. They are necessary. The question is about the dosage and intensity. So you mentioned so many threads, and I'd like to respond to all of them. But let me just start by saying that when Freedom Games contacted me to take part in this panel, and the name of the panel would be Times of Uncertainty, I thought, what am I doing here? I felt so uncertain myself. I'm just examining reality. I try to filter reality through me and present it to you, to a broader audience with my books. So maybe I'm the object of research. So whatever you mentioned, I identify with all these fears. You mentioned war. Yes, I remember. I have experiences from the 22nd of February, 2022. I heard the helicopters. And I felt fear and anxiety. I do not have my personal war experience. I just talked to my parents, and I do remember the Fukushima related fear, but I carry fear of my grandma, of my grandpa. It's so deeply ingrained in my body, and it calls me. And it surfaces when everything seems safe around. So I do have a question to you. How do I get these strong bodily reactions? Well, so I myself, I could, I feel like a potential research object. You could describe or diagnose my case. You asked about Oroville, and you gave a quote about Oroville and asked if you can get rid of this anxiety. Oroville is a special place of decades, a history of decades, and it's an attempt to build a utopian town. And after I described the life of refugees in refugee camps, and these are people who lost everything in a tsunami case, and I also started dealing with the climate crisis. I was interested if it's even feasible to create a world that is different. Do we people have the potential to follow our dreams? Yesterday you had a panel when the dream report was presented. Polish people's dreams. And what is interested, Polish dreams, maybe based on the questions that were asked, do not focus on large-scale politics and global phenomena in the world. They are family-centered, health-centered. People just want to be healthy and happy. So in their direct family nucleus, so there is not too many dreams about society. Now, people in Oroville had a dream to change the world. They wanted to learn to live in a group of diversified individuals forming some sort of unity. And I believe this kind of people, they have a lot of space and tolerance for uncertainty, because for the last 50 years, this is their daily situation. They don't succeed in too many areas. They keep trying. They still exist. It's their third generation. So the founders now have grandchildren who continue living in this community. Now, did they succeed in getting rid of anxiety and fear? No, I don't think so. I believe their anxiety and fear are still quite significant. The question is, how do you live with fear and anxiety so that they do not paralyze your actions? So I'd like to go back to what the history professor, started from. So it's not so bad. Prior to this meeting, I was thinking about my uncertainties, and I believe that as a person whose professional life was most intense in the end of the 90s or early 20s, early 2000s, I remember that there was this atmosphere in my circle, the circle of journalists, reporters. We were, I believe, today's uncertainty. So this generalized uncertainty about what's coming in the world stems from our overconfidence back in the day. I believe this is a slogan to say what Fukuyama said, that this is the end of history is approaching. Now, I believe when I talk to people who research reality, have this excessive sense of confidence that we're heading the right direction, that we have liberal democracy all over the place, that free market will solve all the problems, will civilize everything, that it has no destructive consequences because it's super logical. Actually, let me remind you that 80% of parents back in the day wanted their children to graduate university. Now 40% of students drop out of college or switch their major. So this dream to educate everyone, to elevate us to a higher moral level, collapsed.
And my own uncertainty is about what I'm going to leave behind, not necessarily to my grandchildren in personal terms, but in terms of the generation of people who sinned. Perhaps they were overconfident, perhaps they trusted the future too much. So I would like to hear your personal reflections. I think that what you are saying is class driven or generation driven. Myself, I am part of the generation that was hopeful and enthusiastic after 1980, the new world. We were actually looking forward to our careers. The old system collapsed. You remember the rock band, Perfect? They, they were playing about the new times and the history. The censorship was gone. I remember 1992, I could go abroad. I remember that I had to pack some cans. I was actually embarrassed when I was actually eating my can traveling to the West while Western European people were enjoying their coffee and Prosecco. So this is class driven because the old generation was really scared that they have to retire and their biography is meaningless because they are not able to operate a computer. And you remember the genuine fear of the Polish farmers before we joined the EU. And you remember the Andrzej Leper, the former politician, populist politician. It was his movement was more than populism. It was the genuine fear of the Polish farmers, so uncertain of the upcoming change. And now the vision of Ukraine joining the European Union and the Ukrainian food products flooding the Polish market. This is another trigger that also triggers fear amongst farmers or food sector companies. So 1990s also had their fears and uncertainties, but we were not really acknowledging that, or we were, feeling superior, that this is the way it should be. We were fighting for it. And please bear it in mind that early 1990s was a genuine fear amongst a lot of people in Poland because of AIDS. AIDS started in 1980, and then it was spreading. But it was a true fear of that disease. And I would think that Fukuyama and what people were thinking that, okay, the war was over, but the Polish society was going through a tremendous transformation, and that alone generated a lot of uncertainties and fears. But we didn't acknowledge them. Okay, so now let me turn to Kasia. Would you say that right now elites are actually blind to the fears that affect your generation and younger people? Definitely so. It's not that they don't really notice our fears, they just ridicule us about our fears. Well, I said that I experienced fears that were not mine, and I didn't know where they come from. But the past 5, 6 years, I've been searching for the fear that I should be feeling, but it's hard for me to locate it within my body. And this is the fear of the climate crisis and the environmental crisis, the crisis of biodiversity, and the global collapse that we are approaching. We are already living in the climate crisis. The Earth has heated by 1.4 degrees Celsius. We feel the outcomes of global warming. We know that this is irreversible. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, I read the reports about global critical points, and we are about to reach another one. And the coral reefs are doomed. They will be unsavable. Perhaps just a handful of sanctuaries will be left around the world by 2050. Okay, you may think, okay, coral reefs, a beautiful thing. But when you think about it, like coral reefs is 25% of the animal species, and a billion of people who are economically dependent on that ecosystem. So the scale of what is happening is mind-blowing. And myself, I'm certainly fearful of that. I have a fear inside me, but I don't know where it is. If I were to feel that, I think that I would be suffering from the panic attack. But there is some rational hand that is holding me and not letting me to get immersed in that fear. But this fear is actually evidence-based, it's science-based. And the very fact that this is not addressed by elites and by the governments, it really makes me mad. I feel rage when I think about it. We are facing one of the greatest challenges of mankind. We do have tools to handle that, but there is no political will. And to me, this is unbelievable that people get engaged in the small fights and some maneuvering just to get elected yet another time, instead of thinking long term, building the strategy, and addressing the burning problem. So we are not only being ignored with that fear, but we are also ridiculed. Just like the last generation that is trying to show what's going to happen, what's going on. Okay, I'm not going to add on to that. But since you're a psychologist and you're the head of the Center for Prejudice Research at the Warsaw University, I need to ask you this question. We are doing it for a reason, just to warn and not to forget. But I have a certain thought right now. Well, there were periods in the past when certain nations or groups or societies get overconfident, and these periods bring a lot of danger. We are doing all these things to warn people against populism, but also dictatorship, autocracy, and slavery at the end of the day. I know that it sounds like a very lofty speech, but this is why you are actually coming to the events like this one, to try to figure out what's going on in our world. Michał, can you explain what this mechanism can trigger when people are fearful, they have replacement fears and anxieties, they are looking for psychological umbrellas. What are we scared of here and now in Poland? But this is a fundamental question about our fear, because this is also about the fears that are not spoken, that are not verbalized. Because when we have research, we have surveys with such questions, we usually confront the respondents with some possible answers. And the researchers may not always have the sufficient intuition to ask about unspoken or non-verbalized fears, like the climate fear. Now, we talked about 1990s. It was the time when people were believing in progress. Everyone was certain that things are going to turn for the better. Obviously, there was not evenly distributed certainty. Probably the residents of the big cities were more likely to believe in progress than those who were living in the remote rural communities with the old state-owned farms. So we could read about it in the paper, but it was not our daily life. In the big towns, things were poor. You had to install bars in your windows to be safe, but everyone believed that things are getting better. But today, we don't have this belief. We don't have this narrative that things are changing for the better. When we have social campaigns on TV, fostered by the large companies like insurance or banks, they really rather would speak about resilience. So resilience of the society. This is not the story of the rosy future. This is the story of what can be done to get resilient and be able to face emerging threats. So this is the most optimistic story that you can get. It doesn't get any better, except for two areas, like Donald Trump, who says, drill, baby, drill. And this is the story of the great success in the area where we are facing the greatest failure or where we are facing the total disaster. And another story is, let's actually build Polish champions that will develop AI. So this technological optimism that is still present in the situation where we can see that even social media negatively affect our mental health and undermine democracy. And institutions, government institutions. So politicians never refer to resilience in this context. They deny it. They just are hyper optimistic. You remember that at one panels we've heard that the Polish Parliament will discuss Digital Services Act. So that would be like a political muzzle that would be placed on the media. But people don't care. And I think that politicians will try to push it to the side. They will not be willing to discuss that. So this is an interesting thing. We are living in the total denial of real threats. And at the same time, we are obsessing about the threats that are not that really risky, like criminality or migrants' criminality. I think that fear that Polish people feel about migrants, well, the rates are very high. Obviously, one of the reasons is that for years Poland was very homogeneous, ethnically homogeneous society. So it's easy to scare people. You can project some images in the media that are the sole source of knowledge about Arabs, refugees, migrants, etc. And if people have no real life experience with that, They can be easily influenced with such images, and they may feel fear. When you look at the most recent presidential elections, one of the candidates, Grzegorz Braun, who based his campaign on anti-Semitism and anti-European rhetorics, and we looked at the distribution of his support. Like, people that supported him lived in the places where there were no Ukrainian migrants. So he was able to instigate that fear amongst his voters because these people were not able to relate to the real people, to some Maria who works in the store or a guy who works on the construction site. If you notice people, if they are your neighbors, you're not likely to be fearful. Last Thursday and Friday, I attended a conference in Kraków about the propaganda of success. And I would say that perhaps we could use some populism that was pervasive during the time of the leadership of Edward Gierek. It was early 1970s. He was the first secretary of the Communist Party in Poland. And during his rule, optimism in the Polish society was like 80%. So Polish people really believed in his promises that he's going to rebuild Poland. During the Labor Day, people were marching and holding sunflowers. It was the sign of optimism. Obviously, I don't need to explain how that story ended. And we are much more critical now about such stories. No one will believe in the claims that we are going to make a leapfrog or people will live on average 150 years, etc. But at that time, it was a positive narrative that shared the same objective for everyone. It was not about eliminating threats, but about projecting positive images. And I think that we need this projection of positive images and aspirations.
Well, still, I will pursue my questions. Your responses are great, interesting, but you keep ignoring my question, which is, what is it that we fear? What is it that we are supposed to fear? In the States, they have this great MAGA movement, which is the sentiment, having to have the father of the nation and dictatorship, somebody who will take away all the anxieties and concerns and will take the lead. I won't even mention all the other leaders, Putin and so on. So the real question is, shouldn't we have some small anxiety, given that much of our sentiments make actually lure us to the situation in which have a father, a leader. So that's my fear. Is it also something that you fear? Well, yes. Now that I listen to all of you, and my thoughts keep processing things, so I fear that our reality is twisted. So we believe AI will help us solve our problems because it will come up with a solution how to capture CO2, and it will create technologies that we are not capable of creating, and everything will be okay. And the solution for aging societies, such as the inflow of migrants, is now perceived as the most dangerous situation. So all these things put us in an absurd political situation. So my fear is that this political side that I'm voting for, which is quite still holding on to the values that are important to me, that there are no brave people in this group. And that's my fear. Everybody is overly relaxed. They are playing little wars. know people with a strategy, with a vision, with courage, who would come and say, hey, this will be difficult. We are heading tough times, but this has to be done. That's my vision. Follow me. If somebody like that appeared, I think that that would be a great leader. Churchill said, we have blood, sweat ahead of us and tears, but we will eventually win. Well, let me just say that populism is a temporary condition. It goes either towards democracy or totalitarian rule. I believe we are heading towards populism, not authoritarian rule. So I don't think we'll have totalitarian leaders installed. We will be governed by populists who keep satisfying volatile emotions of the people of social media. They respond to different fears. They're not stable with their agenda. They will never courageously say, I can promise you will have blood, sweat, and tears. They will promise, I will satisfy all your changing needs, whatever you express in your social media. So this is a very indefinite politics, just as Donald Trump is showing. And this is not what we are accustomed to. It's a different quality. It's different from fascism that we know. This is a new phenomenon which is not very well defined yet, but it may be equally dangerous and it may transgress our civic freedoms. Well, it's hard to even add anything, maybe just a little bit, that historians are better at reporting history than fortune-telling. So you mentioned different kinds of fears, but there is one more fear that I would like to mention. It's a general prevailing fear, and it's fear of loneliness. And I study social practices back in the communist times, different parties, events. People tended to meet in small groups with friends or family members. And families, by the way, were much bigger in the previous generation. It was quite common that people would have 5 brothers or some sisters. Nowadays, we live in smaller groups, and loneliness, I believe, will become a social issue. So in order to incite emotions or to mobilize people to fight for a better social ordeal, in a lonely society, it will be very difficult. People tend to behave as separate atoms. And actually, you mentioned it too. Yes, it's a fact. Well, we are not lonely. Look at this room. There's a group of people who gathered here, and we actually have a few minutes to handle questions from the audience. At 10, we need to leave this room to make space for other group of wise people. So I believe our panelists will be happy to respond to some of your questions later on, informally, but maybe somebody would like to ask a question here and now. Good morning, Jakub Pogłębski. My question is, do you see any chance, any opportunity to cut off this time of uncertainty? Every generation has its time. My parents did, I do. So now, as I'm hearing what you're saying, what will be the fear of my children, of the next generation? So the real question is, can we, in a way, cut off future generations from our anxieties and our fears? Technologically, we are able to deal with some of the uncertainties and fears, but are we able to manage those uncertainties in an economic level? Anyone? Let me just repeat. I believe every generation will have its own anxiety and fear, and it may actually drive you. So the goal is not to eliminate fear. For instance, in my case, my fear is about the climate, so it activates me. Had I not had this fear, I would continue flying planes, using planes, or I wouldn't think how to even handle this challenge. It's not like I can solve it on my own, but at least I'm doing something, and I'm becoming familiar with my fears. I don't think we can eradicate fear. Well, first of all, do look at history. Think about the Chernobyl incident and how mothers and parents feared that the contamination would be overwhelmingly significant. I was satisfied because it was I was about to take my finals in high school, and I was looking forward to have a few days, and this was the first of my parade time. So I was thinking if people would actually go out to the streets. But we had many such moments in Polish history. I remember Cliff Harris's visit to Poland. He was he was a miracle person, and he accepted. He saw 700,000 people. Some of them were transported in ambulance just for him to put his hand on their head. So this was a demonstration of magical thinking and belief that people could get actually healed this way. And I don't want to abuse the word Middle Ages because it shows Middle Ages, but Middle Ages were not so terrible as we all believe it to be. But you know what I'm getting at? This is something we no longer experience. Our hope is in science. So I would recommend learn from history, and just as Kasia mentioned. Fear and anxiety are needed. We need them. Look at Aldous Huxley's book, Brand New World. A world without anxiety is horrific. It's a terrible place. It's a utopia. So when I think about anxiety, we should just prepare and realize that anxiety exists. But we should not have this pessimistic view. So this was the experience of Polish 20th century, a defeat after defeat, Russians in Budapest, and other failures. Because you can imagine what happens if Russians enter or transgress your borders. But I'd like to mention the book by Bilewicz, and he, in one of the last chapters of the book, he draws attention to the fact that in our history we did have successful moments. We had some color. So let's not focus on being defeated and on failure, but to be slightly positive, also when thinking about future. It's a great summary. So I'd love to ask a question, but I won't because I know the time is running out. But I will just leave it out in the open. So I'd like to ask a question to a psychologist. Michał, you said each of us has their level of anxiety. Psychology probably knows or can give us a hint how to work on our anxiety and fear. How can we get more resilience? And that's my wish to you. And I invite you to have follow-up discussions later on.
Well, Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the U.S. It's a network, that is to say, organizations that share common values of limited government, of free enterprise, personal liberty, personal responsibility.
Atlas Network provides training and support to help build capacity, but most importantly, we give our partners the tools they need to be successful.
Mam plan na bezpieczną firmę. To plan firmowy z cybertarczą, która blokuje zagrożenia w sieci.
Cyberbezpieczeństwo? Masz od tego Orange. Teraz cybertarcza za 0 zł we wszystkich planach firmowych, a w wybranych smartfony 50% taniej. Orange tu jest.
Telewizja Polska to więcej tego, co widzowie cenią najbardziej. Pasjonujące filmy i seriale, a w obsadzie najbardziej gorące nazwiska. Największe sportowe imprezy i momenty, które przejdą do historii. Bieżące wydarzenia, którymi żyje Polska i świat. Przebojowe koncerty, które łączą w zabawie wszystkich Polaków. Znakomite spektakle, które gromadzą rekordową publiczność. Telewizja Polska. Otwórz się na więcej.
Do zgłoszeń? Gotowi? Start!
Ja zgłoszę bibliotekę!
Ja, pierwszy basen w gminie.
Ja amfiteatr od naszej orkiestry. Wszystko w waszych rękach. Co powstanie dzięki wsparciu totalizatora sportowego w twojej okolicy? Zgłoś obiekt sportowy lub kulturalny. Wejdź na stronę gdygrasz.pl, bo gdy grasz, wszystko gra.
Kiedy zapala się lampka on air, to jest najlepszy moment.
Nie ma jednego instrumentu, który lubię najbardziej. To zawsze jest kontekst.
Uwielbiam sport bez obrazu właśnie z tej perspektywy, kiedy to ja mogę ten obraz kreować.
Pusty stadion nie jest cichy. Tam gołębie startują.
Jak ja bym chciała, żeby z mojego radia było słychać "Będzie okej".
Ono może być cichutko w tle. Radio, które jest przyjacielem tego odbiorcy, przyjacielem człowieka.
Do PKO Banku Polskiego przenosi się nowy klient.
Weź się, przenieść się jest easy. Czaruś, wytłumacz.
Otwierasz konto w PKO Banku Polskim i masz święty spokój. Przeniosą kasę i zlecenia stałe, a pracodawcę poinformują. Ogarniesz to przez internet, bo to dobry bank jest.
Ej, widzę cię. Wolisz w oddziale? Dawaj do nas.
Otwórz konto w PKO Banku Polskim i dołącz do 12 milionów klientów. PKO, twój bank polski.
PL Music Video Awards, festiwal polskich wideoklipów, spotkania, projekcje, warsztaty, do tego gala finałowa i wybór najlepszych polskich teledysków. Zapraszamy do Łodzi 4-6 grudnia, szczegóły na www.plmva.com.
Myślisz, że to ktoś wyjątkowy, miłośnik kultury,
kto sypie cytatami z pamięci. A to może być ktoś, kto na wakacje pakuje książkę. Tę samą co rok temu. To możesz być ty. Bo czytanie nie jest dla wybranych. Jest dla wszystkich. Podziel się tym.
Polska Stolica Kultury. Jesteś na miejscu.
It can look like this. Or like this. It is threatened. But it is our responsibility to protect it. For each person, it means something different. But when we reach it, we all know what it looks like, what it sounds like, or how it feels. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together. Freedom.
So we just had an emergency landing in Poland, in Łódź. Yeah, don't worry guys, we won't be here for long. Lads, hello vlog. So I know we were supposed to show you some wild animals and a bit more sun, but
yeah, instead we have to spend 2 days in this boring place.
Come on.
Did you say boring? I will show you beautiful nature and animals and even more. And you will see what this region has to offer. Deal?
So we said yes, because why not, right? And this girl took us around the whole region. We ate pierogies. We saw some Polish art. We saw some wild animals. We got spiritual. And after all, we fell in love with this place.
W kinie doceniam prawdziwe emocje.
Na boisku pilnuję czystej gry.
W kuchni poszukuję autentycznych smaków.
Ale w internecie jest to trudniejsze.
W internecie wobec informacji też trzeba być sędzią. Dezinformacja jest jak bramka strzelona ze spalonego.
Więc jeśli coś we mnie wzbudza emocje, daję sobie czas. Może ktoś specjalnie chce mnie zagotować, bym uległa manipulacji.
Filtruj informacje.
Sprawdzaj ich źródła.
Nie masz pewności? Nie udostępniaj.
Postaw na czysty przekaz.